your Chicago Bulls would have had the seventh pick or the eighth pick,
eighth pick, yeah.
and now it belongs to Orlando
Orlando.
for the grand prize of Nikola Vujovic.
You can't even say his
Yay!
name right. Vucevic.
Vucevic. Nikola
Vucci, man.
Huzovic.
Let me put you on game.
Transitioning to some teams that have a lot to figure out. The draft lottery happened the other night, and your Chicago Bulls would have had the seventh pick or the eighth pick.
Eighth pick, yeah.
And now it belongs to Orlando for the grand prize of Nikola Vujovic. Yay!
You can't even say his name right. Vucevic.
Nikola
Vucci, man.
Huzovic. Another Slovenian.
Yeah, so are you asking me how I feel about the trade? Is that your way of asking me how I feel about the trade?
Yeah, how do you feel about the trade? How do you feel about the draft lottery? I know you're the one that put me on to Tankathon, which does great work in terms of just putting these odds up, as well as giving their draft NBA draft like mock drafts and pre-draft analysis. And it's weird because in years past, you could tell me everything about the top prospects, but I feel like because Chicago is like teetering on playoff hopes, you didn't take them that serious, and maybe you're not as well versed in these draft prospects this year.
Yeah, I'm not as well versed. I think last year I knew everything about everyone between like 1 and 12. But I think I'm more like top 6 this year. I think there's a lot of interesting guys. I mean, on the Chicago Orlando trade, real quick. I'm a fan of it still. I think a lot of people are down on it because the Bulls didn't do so well in the second half of the season because they just weren't gelling. They completely changed their style of play. They went from playing really up and down to dump the ball to Vooch in the post and let him go to work. So I think they'll need another offseason in order to develop that chemistry. I think Zach and Vooch will play really well together because Vooch is a plus 40% 3-point shooter. He almost demands a double team on the post, and he's a good passer. So I think it remains to be seen what will happen. I think you need developments from guys like Kobe White and Patrick Williams and see what happens going forward. I'm not sold on the team. We'll see what happens next year. We'll definitely have to do a Bulls deep dive at some point on the pod, just because I've been avoiding talking about them as a fan because there hasn't been much to talk about. But on the draft lottery, a huge win for Detroit because a lot of people consider Cade Cunningham to be the far and away number 1 prospect. I have some info on Cade. I'm definitely going to watch a lot more film on him before the draft itself, just to see, what all the hoopla is about but on a surface level, from having watched a couple Oklahoma State games and watching some film on him so far, he's exactly what you need in today's NBA. He's 6'8", really talented, efficient scorer. He's shown that he can get his shot off from just about anywhere in college when there were some doubts about that and some doubts about his shooting. But he's a big playmaker, which is what you need in the style of like a James Harden or a Luka Doncic. Not that he's going to be as talented as those players. He has a good chance to be, but maybe not immediately, but down the line in his career. But yeah, he's exactly the prototype that you need in the NBA. Like him along with versatile big men and like really good wings that are able to defend on one end and actually score on the other are some of the most valuable archetypes in the NBA, or archetypes in the NBA, excuse me. And I think he fills that role really well. I was really hoping that Chicago was going to cash in on that 4.5% chance to hop up there and get him at number 1, because I think
he would have been top 4 protected.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it would have been nice. But yeah, he fills so many holes. I think you can put him legit on just about any team that doesn't have that big creator, and he functions really well. So it'll be intriguing to see what happens with him and Detroit. They've got a good, solid base as far as guys like Jeremy Grant and Sadiq Bey had a really good year this year. Killian Hayes struggled a lot, but I think he'll benefit from an off season, and he wasn't healthy for most of the year, so we'll see what's going on with that. But there's some intriguing options going down the list of the lottery. Houston has a big decision to make because Evan Mobley is the number 2 prospect on most boards. Really versatile big man. I've heard some people call him one of the best defenders in college basketball over the last like decade or so, just because of his ability to block shots without fouling. And he's almost like a guard. He has guard level skills. So it'll be intriguing to see his development, but I don't know if Houston's going to want to pair him with Christian Wood. So they might end up going with Jalen Green or Jalen Suggs. They might end up going with one of the Jalen's, which is crazy to see the amount of Jalen's that are in that are in these drafts, whether you're talking about football or basketball. But Cleveland jumping up. Cleveland jumping up was interesting as well. Toronto jumping up was very interesting. I'll be interested to see what Cleveland is going to do. I think they might be considering trading Colin Sexton in order to make room for another guard, or because I think they might think that Darius Garland and Colin Sexton are a little redundant. So we'll have to see. Toronto, they could very easily, depending on what they do with Kyle Lowry and what happens with their roster, they could very easily be back in it next year if they're able to get some impact from their pick, whether that be Jonathan Kuminga from the G League and Ignite, or Jalen Green, whose NBA comp is Zach LaVine. Explosive scorer, explosive leaper, basically a walking bucket, essentially.
I mean, he was the number 1 overall prospect this year. And it's really been interesting to see how, with guys like Jalen Green and Jonathan Kuminga, how the G League route is going to play out in how these guys get evaluated and how they are prepared to enter the league. And it's been really interesting to see because they kind of revamped the whole G League, where they increased player salary. Players are now able to, guys like Jalen Green could get like shoe deals if they wanted to. And they also set up like developmental practices where they could get basically like emphasis on personal and professional development, as well as access to agents and just a whole bunch of things that they would not have gotten in college. And Jalen
like
Green
NBA prep school
before this year, and before. Say it again.
Yeah, it's like NBA prep school, basically. You know.
Sorry, what'd you say?
NBA prep school.
Yeah, and him being able to, he kind of lost that number 1 overall shiny status, but he did perform in the G League, against NBA type athletes. And so it's going to be really fascinating to see how him and Kuminga adjust to the league. And they set a precedent for what could be a very interesting path for athletes to follow, because, it's interesting hearing an argument for the Australia basketball league and how guys are making like in the 6 figures in Australia. So they figure that they go over there, you got guys like LaMelo Ball and RJ Hampton that went over there, and other guys that might go to Europe or play in China or whatever, and not actually stay in America because the G and D League just paid so poorly, which is insane when you think about how much money and revenue that the NBA is bringing in, that they can't afford to get the guys in the G League a decent salary to, really compete. But that's the topic for it. That's another convo. So I'm really fascinated to see how that plays off as far as these lottery prospects go. But this, and also what's been interesting to see is how the draft odds have just changed so dramatically because Toronto jumped up so many spots. They were probably projected to get at least the 7th or below pick, and they jumped up to 4. you got teams like Orlando that had a top prospect, in line, and they kind of slid to fifth, which sucks.
Yeah, they're the
So
losers of the draft for sure. Yeah,
yeah,
definitely. The only way they would have lost worse is if they would have dropped to fifth and then the Bulls would have got the pick. That's the only way it would have been worse.
yeah. So, I like this whole new system. And a lot of teams have become, there's no incentive to lose. And I feel like that's kind of been exemplary because the records of the lowest teams this year have not been as terrible as they were in previous years. Like,
Yeah, there's
I
no
remember
teams that are
seeing,
just winning like 15 games,
yeah, like 12 games, 10 games. And had the season been longer, I could definitely have seen a lot of these, at least Houston, maybe even winning 20 games. So,
yeah. The play-in tournament helps as well. I think there's like less teams that are just mailing it in, like we talked about on a previous pod. So that, along with the leveled lottery odds, have helped a lot.
yeah.
Minnesota also big loser of the draft, losing their pick to Golden State, and just continue to be like a rudderless boat. Just not really going in any particular direction, losing that D'Angelo Russell trade for sure, because Andrew Wiggins has turned out to be a very valuable player, and D'Angelo Russell has been very like hit or miss, and to also lose a pick in that as well is tough.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll see. It'll be an interesting draft night. A lot of really great prospects. I'm looking forward to seeing what they do in especially summer league, because we actually have a summer league this year, and what sophomores do. Guys like, of course, Pat, and guys that didn't necessarily have the best rookie season, but we'll see what they do going forward. Like Obi's career development. A guy like Killian Hayes had a really rough rookie season, had some decent games towards the end, but it'll be interesting to see what happens to him.